I am so excited today to have Heather Monahan on the new mid. I stalked her on Clubhouse and she was so gracious to accept my invitation. Welcome, Heather.
I'll tell you what you did well, which a lot of people don't do, is when you have multiple feeds going, whether it be DMs, emails, text, people on your team, Clubhouse, whatever, sometimes you lose people in the different platforms. And I had lost your message and I knew we had had a conversation. I knew I had committed to do your show, but I couldn't remember how to find you, and you circled back and said, "Hey, I just want to circle back on this." And thank goodness so many people just won't do that. And they think, "Oh, that person's a jerk." It was just that I couldn't find the message. So I'm glad that you circled back.
Well, it's so awesome to have you here. I'm a huge fan, but I would love for you, before we talk about confidence, because you are all about building confidence and you have such an amazing story. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny, people will call me a confidence expert, which I don't think I am, right? I've only been, talking about confidence for 3 years. But what I am an expert in is in sales and sales leadership in corporate America. I have 20 years experience as an equity partner, as a VP and EVP, a chief revenue officer, driving teams to success and driving revenue for publicly traded companies. So that's really what my expertise is and what I've done forever, until I was named one of the most influential women in radio going into Q4 2017. And I was fired as soon as the CEO I had worked for 14 years, he fell ill. He replaced himself with his daughter, and she wanted no part of me. So that sort of started me down a completely different path, writing my first book, launching a speaking business, giving my first TEDx talk, launching my podcast, and so on and so forth.
Well, I find it interesting because part of your story you talk about is you grew up poor, which do you think growing up poor gave you the confidence to climb to the C street and then to reinvent yourself after being fired?
No, I don't think it gave me confidence at all. Actually, it gave me a lot of shame, which is not positive. However, what it taught me was work ethic and drive. So I always knew one thing, I could outwork anybody. There was just I would never meet a person, although I'm interviewing Jamie Kern Lima today, and I think that she may work harder than me because it's just insane how hard that lady works. But I just always felt, yeah, people might be smarter than me, prettier than me, well versed in technology versus, where I'm at. But I knew deep down in my heart, I can work harder than anybody else. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop that. And so that was sort of my strategy out of the gates when I was very young, because I knew I wanted a future where money wouldn't be a problem, that it wouldn't be a struggle. And to make that happen, I knew I had to work hard. So yeah, I started working at a very young age, and that served me well because my work ethic has, never dipped or changed at all.
Well, I love what you're talking about with your work ethic because it's interesting that you had broken the glass ceiling and won this award. And then here you are, you get fired. You get fired basically for doing a good job by someone who's envious of you, obviously. So,
Well, in my opinion, I just wanted to speak to that. In my opinion, I was fired because I launched a personal brand 1 year before getting fired. The reason I really did this was I believed there's more outside of this world I'm living in. There's more to do that can bring good to the universe and, to others. Why should I just be giving my tips, tricks, and expertise to the people that work for me? That's sort of unfair and sort of shallow. So I launched a personal brand aimed to help, pull back the curtain, show people if you grew up poor and you don't think you can make it to the C suite, I'm here to tell you you can. And here's how you do it. When I launched that personal brand, the GC and the CFO called me immediately and said, shut it down. There is no place for this here. And it took a year of being bullied about that personal brand. I would not back off though. And I'm so proud of me. It was very hard. I mean, was crying every night. I wouldn't sleep. I was losing my hair. I threw my back out. It was awful. However, I knew I was great at my job. I never thought I'd get fired. And I never thought to quit. I just had been there so long and been in that industry so long. So I just wasn't thinking in that regard. However, what a blessing it was in the end that I ended up, getting fired a year into it, a year into launching that personal brand. She got the CEO position, and she just said, oh, no more. She didn't say that. She said, we're going to get rid of the chief revenue officer position. There's no longer a need for you. That's how it was phrased to me, but I knew why. And, I was super proud of how I handled the whole situation, and it ended up being a blessing in disguise.
It's interesting because then you went on to write your book. You said that well, first of all, I want to circle back. How did it's funny because you'll read about you slit on your couch, you laid on your couch under a weighted blanket drinking Chardonnay. And then you decided to tweet that you got fired. Now that's extremely bold. What made you decide to do that?
That's the best decision I ever made. And it's so funny. I was prepping for my interview later today with Jamie Kern Lima. And one of the things I was reading about was she's talking about all her success came from doing the antithesis of what everybody else told her to do. People told her to put makeup on beautiful models, and beautiful models sell makeup. And she said, no, I want to use really flawed people at like myself and, whoever, and aged models and whatever. And everyone said no, but that's what made her be the breakout success that she is today. And when I was reading that, I thought to myself, that is what helped me to be a breakout success, was the fact that nobody wants to talk about getting fired. I'm the freaking poster girl for getting fired now. And so a couple things. Number one, I had built a personal brand. That nothing would have happened. That tweet wouldn't have reached anybody if I hadn't built the personal brand. So it's important to anyone listening right now, if you don't have a forward-facing personal brand, invest in yourself today and launch it. Yes, years ago was the right time. Now is the only time. Get moving. So that was the first thing that I did that was smart. The next thing that I did was I was completely depressed. I was scared. I didn't know, I was afraid, upset. I didn't know what to do. I claimed space for myself. I told everybody, don't come to me with your problems right now. Everyone give me space. I've got to figure some things out. And it just came to me in my head. I likened it to getting divorced. When I first got divorced, nobody would ask me on dates. And I would think, that's weird. When I was younger, I got asked on dates all the time. And I realized no one knows I'm not married anymore. I've got to raise my hand and say, I'm single. And when I was having that analogy in my mind, I thought, no one knows I'm available for work. If I raise my hand and say, I just got fired, everyone's going to want to hire me, offer me partnerships or something. Something will happen. And I knew I didn't like sitting under the weighted blanket anymore. So I said, I'm going to raise my hand. And I took to my personal brand. I went to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I went to Twitter, on every platform. And I put the same post up. And I just said, I was just fired. And today is an awful day. If I've ever helped you in any way, it would mean the world to me to hear from you now. And that post went viral.
And that's when you got the interview with Elvis Duran, correct?
Yeah, Froggy tweeted at me, if I can ever be of help, let me know. And I tweeted right back, get me on the show. And he said, okay. And he did.
That is amazing. It's wonderful to have people, reach out to you like that. Now, I have to ask, you had the TED Talk where you talk about, the Me Too movement, which was extremely important. But the elephant in the room is a lot of women are mean girls. You bring up the poster of Mean Girls, you bring up the poster of The Devil Wears Prada, and I have to
You
say,
watched it. You watched my talk.
I did. Well, 32,000 people have watched your talk, and I have to say, honestly, that happened to me. I had a lot of mean female bosses. So I just have to ask, have you heard from her? Do you know, has she resurfaced at all?
No, of course not. And it's so funny. When I first got fired, I was so scared, thinking, because at first they had attorneys contacting me and saying that I had stolen my computer and stolen my phone and all this craziness. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I talk about this publicly, they're going to have me arrested. And, and I was thinking crazy like that for a while. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, but I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't steal a computer. I didn't steal a phone. I'm not lying about any of this. If I'm just owning my truth, what can they do to me? And then fast forward, I was on the James Altucher podcast right when my book was about to come out. And I was telling James, I said, my gosh, I'm so scared. What if she sues me? What if I get home to my house and the police are there? And he started laughing. He's written, 20 books, whatever. And he said, listen, anyone can sue you for anything. It doesn't matter. He said, but the thing is, you're telling the truth. You're exposing a truth she probably doesn't love hearing about. He said she's going to do nothing because she wants it to go away and hopes that you just disappear. And I thought, boy, I hope you're right. But he was right. That that nothing's ever happened. And in fact, so bizarre, because this is now 3 years later, I had an interview with Business Insider 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, and I have been interviewed for many things. I've never had someone go back and attempt to interview her to, get her side of the story. That just has never happened. For whatever reason, that never happened. And so they send me the link to my article and I'm reading it, and it says we contacted her to hear her side of the story and get her opinions. And all that is reported is that we do not comment on past employees.
Well, there you go. It's funny because I was always wondering, I was thinking to myself, gosh, I wonder if she realizes and regrets what she did. You can't help it, thinking about what a huge mistake. But it's funny how we can see a door close and they always say another door will open. So you had started a personal brand the year before this happened. How amazing. And I have to say, you have helped so many women build confidence. Although you said in the beginning, oh, I've only been doing this 3 years and I'm really more in sales. But honestly, Heather, listening to your clubhouse, I've heard how you really do pay attention and give great value. And you talk about the green light with fear. Do you mind telling me a little more about that? Telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's actually from my TED talk, but I talk about it all the time anyways. When we're children, we're taught that if you feel fear, run home, get under your bed, stay safe, it'll pass, just hide from whatever it is. And I guess at 2, 3, and 4 years old, that makes good sense. But at 46, where I am now, that makes horrible sense, right? It's actually the antithesis. And so, what I learned after a lifetime of not knowing this was, okay, if I do the post about getting fired, it's going to feel scary. It's totally out of, my comfort zone. I don't know what to do about this. I'm going to be afraid. I did it, and boom, everything went great because I stepped into fear. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try it again. So Elvis's show was the biggest show I was ever going to go on at that point in time in my career. I had never been on something that big, and I was scared to death. And I remember saying to myself at the hotel, okay, I stepped into fear last time and it worked out great. What's the worst that can happen? I fall down. It's on Getty Images, totally embarrassing, but first world problems, I'll survive. Okay, I'm going to go. And I remember being on the show and being so nervous. And when I watch the video now, it makes me laugh because I can see I'm super nervous. And then I had my phone on vibrate, and Elva says, "Who's left their phone on in here?" And I just started saying, rookie move over here. And then I kind of, got normal after that. And I left there that day and I felt amazing. And I said, you know what? Fear is a liar, but more than it not being real, it's a green light. And anytime you feel fear, it means step into it and step into it faster. And then it disappears.
I love that. Well, you talk about massive action and, what exactly do you mean by massive action? Someone should take massive action.
Well, I mean, I've definitely built a career and a business around stepping into fear and taking massive action, right? So I can just, I've done it 9 million times back in corporate America, but, more recently, I would say when I first got fired, I knew I wanted a reputable brand side by side with me because I thought that would give me credibility. So I called the CEO of Perry Ellis International, a $1 billion company. And when he didn't call me back, I called him again and again and again. Then I emailed him. Then I went to where he worked out. Then I went to where his wife gets her nails done. I'm relentless in my pursuit of taking action, right? Like I will take massive action. I got the meeting. I show up for the meeting. I pitch him my idea. He loves my idea. We sign a contract. We worked together for 9 months to come up with an idea to go to HSN. I got the meeting with the buyer at HSN to pitch our clothing line. Now, in the end, we were told no, we didn't get the deal. So sometimes I take massive action and it doesn't get me to that outcome I wanted. However, I was a partner of Perry Ellis's, and that opened up other doors for me, right? And so the act of taking action and stepping into fear and taking massive action, if you're doing it and checking in with you and it makes sense, like, okay, this sounds like a sound decision to be a good idea, it is always the right answer. Sitting back and not taking action will never build momentum for you. And without momentum, you are going nowhere fast.
What I love about that is you took yourself from the couch to tweeting to doing massive action? Because I think a lot of times people hear the story, oh, she got fired and now she's like has this amazing personal brand. And recently, I think you got hired to be a guest professor at Harvard, correct? So
Yeah, it's
that's
crazy. It's so bizarre.
exciting. Well,
Yeah,
see,
I was also signed for HarperCollins leadership for my new book that's coming out in a few months. I was also appointed to the board of directors of HealthLink Biotech Company. There's been so many things like Harvard that have happened in the past couple of years. It's mind blowing.
but what I love is you don't hear about the Perry Ellis, you don't hear the stories that what it takes to get there. You sort of hear the end product and you think, "Oh, that just sort of happened overnight." And so, if there is someone listening to this podcast who has gotten fired or who sees the signs, right? I mean, I was in corporate America. We're all there. We see the signs. We know in our gut when other people are getting promoted above us or things are happening. So, what would you suggest to them to sort of get their ducks in a row? What would you suggest for them to do to have the next step?
Okay, number one, get this book, Confidence Creator, because I literally write out the roadmap of exactly every step that I took from the day that I got fired, right? And some of the steps I took before I got fired that I think people should incorporate now. So that's number one. Number two, listen to my podcast. Every week I give behind the scenes on what's really going on, the real challenges, how I'm really addressing them. I don't know what the outcome is yet, but I'm sharing. Here's what I'm doing to work through this challenge, whether it be the pandemic or losing a business opportunity, losing speaking engagements. I talk about how I'm overcoming it and how I suggest you can apply the knowledge and tactics back to your life. That's two things. So the actual steps that I took, was raising my hand, asking for help, owning that I got fired, which I think is brilliant, reframing seeing getting fired as in good company. And by that, I mean Oprah's been fired, Mark Cuban, J.K. Rowling, the most successful people in the world have been fired. So if you haven't been fired, get fired. Get yourself in this arena, right? It's amazing. You've got great company. It's something to be celebrated. But then I created a 30-day action plan. I created a vision for where I was going. Much like I talk about my TED Talk, I took an image of me at a different time in my life when I was confident, and I put that image everywhere to remind myself where I've been and where I'm going. I fired a villain that day. Get rid of negative people from your life. And when you get rid of negativity, you create an opening and space for positive people to come in and help you.
I love that. So, if you are, again, I love how you talk about creating an image and you talk about the image of yourself. You have, the 5 steps that you have and the platform in your brain, which I think is so huge. How we talk to ourselves is so important. Um, but in that regards, talking to yourself and you're going up and you're giving a keynote speak and you're in front of a huge audience, how do you build the confidence to go out there and speak to these people?
Yeah, so the best example I can give you, number one, I've been speaking for 20 years. So it's important for people to not lose sight of that, right? I didn't get paid for it in corporate America, but I spoke all the time at huge events and for my teams. I did something all the time. When you do something all the time, at least twice a week, I was speaking in front of an audience, at least for 20 years. When you create that type of repetition, you're going to have competence in that venue and speaking, right? It's not going to be new or scary to you. However, when you go into new arenas, it can be intimidating. So I've disciplined myself to find ways to overcome that fear. Number one, there's a very fine line between fear and excitement. So I say out loud, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm really excited. And I trick myself into thinking, you're not nervous. You're excited. You care. You're fired up. I have a playlist that I use every single time that I'm going into something massive. And I was a psych major back in college. And if you're familiar with this, it's amazing. If not, I'm going to educate you. Pavlov's law is a scientific study that scientists did with a dog. And you would ring a bell and then you would feed the dog. Ring a bell, feed the dog. Suddenly you ring the bell. You don't need to give any food. The dog starts salivating. The dog knows food is coming. So I do the same thing with training my mind or priming my mind with this one playlist. When I play that one playlist, everything else disappears around me. I get into a zone that I am going to kill it. I see it happening in my mind. I start manifesting it. I visualize it. It's happening. I also keep lavender with me anytime I'm doing something really, really big. That's another grounding thing for me to do. I snip it right before I'm going on. The most scared I've ever been for any talk in my life was my TEDx talk, because there's a lot of conditions. You can't leave a red circle. You have a ticker going. You have to hit the 10-minute mark. It lives online forever. So if you make a mistake, there's no, I made a mistake. Like, you can make a joke. No, you can't. You don't want to make a mistake, right? If you're giving a keynote and you fall, which I literally was interviewing Sarah Blakely live on stage, my heel got caught in the grate and I almost fell over. I made a joke about it. It was funny, right? It broke the ice. You don't want to do that in your TED talk, okay? So there's additional pressure on you beyond anything. Then I had a negative person that was there telling me that I had blown it in the warm-ups that morning. So here's what I did is I surround myself by people that are my champions that cheer me on and help me tune out the noise. I use music to work for me. I use that playlist and it gets me into a zone that people can't penetrate. I have my lavender, with me hand in hand. And really what I did that kind of erases any other possibility, I practiced for months, at least 2 months. I hired a coach. I invested in myself and I worked with her 3 different times before my big speech to put me on a mini stage and give me feedback and pretend to be an audience. I called Amy Morin, who her TED Talk has 50 million views. And I said, I want to run it by you first. Will you listen to me? And she said, yes. So I went to experts, right? People who had been where I wanted to go. I did so much work for this that when it came time, I was a first speaker that day and I was freaking out because everything was going wrong that day. And they said, and our first speaker is Heather Monahan. I closed my eyes. I was so nervous. My heart was coming out of my body. And I just said, if you don't walk out there, you're never going to be able to live with yourself. If you go out there and blow it, I'm going to be so proud of you. And that's all I remember. I took all the pressure off myself. I don't remember anything for the next 90 seconds. I don't know how I walked out to that circle. I don't know how I started. I don't know how I didn't screw up. I have no idea. But about 90 seconds in, I kind of came to, and you can see if you go watch it now that you know that. If you don't know that, you're not going to know what happened. You'll see a change in my demeanor because I came to. I was in automatic pilot that I had set up through priming myself, through discipline, through hard work, through routine, through Pavlov's law, through all these other things that propelled me out to that stage when things were too overwhelming and too scary until I could come to, become myself, and then really kill it.
What's so amazing about that is it sounds like you have, from your high school years, from working really hard, and your work ethic has just followed you through your entire life to your TED Talk, to, talking people into, getting you on the podcast. And you were on Gary Vee's podcast. I watched that. And he was saying how you asked. It was just, he was so impressed that you just asked him while he was on your podcast. So he had you on. What was that experience like? And did you take any of the he loves to give advice. So how did you use any of the advice that he gave you?
Well, what's funny is the first time I was with him was when I interviewed him for my show. I went to his office to do the interview. I had formed a rapport and relationship with his team. Amazing guys. And as always, when you're trying to get to someone who's high profile, a CEO of a company, somewhere high up, you want to have an affiliation relationship with the people around them. They're the people that are going to help you. So when I saw his number one guy, when I walked in, I grabbed him and I said, listen, I have an idea. And he said, what is it? I said, I want to get on his podcast. And how do you think the best way to do it is? He said, oh gosh, I don't know. I said, then answer me this question. Who's ultimately going to make the decision? Introduce me to the person. He said, honestly, it's Gary, Heather. Like, nobody else sets it up. It's him. I said, okay, what do you think the best approach is? He said, if I was you, I would just ask while on air so he can't back out of it. And I said, okay. So once I knew that, I had this inside person telling me if I did this, it's a pretty good chance I'm going to get on. So, at the end of our interview, which he gave a great interview for my first show, my first podcast, which was amazing, super appreciate him for doing that. And he gave total social love to it too, which is amazing. But right at the end of that one, I said, well, Gary, I would not be the sales and confidence expert that I am if I didn't come in hot with an ass. So here I come. And I pinned him down. He said yes. He cracked up. He thought it was hilarious. And then he had me back a few months later. And when I was back on his show, he challenged me. He said, "Listen, here's the thing." He said, "I want to help you and I want you to grow." Because he's an entrepreneur who's been an entrepreneur his whole life, 40 something years. I'm a brand new entrepreneur. At that time, I'd only been an entrepreneur a year and a half, right? So he said, "I want to help you. And here's how I'm going to help you." He said, "You do an okay job on LinkedIn." He said, "But I want you to do an amazing job. So I'm going to challenge you. You've got to do it." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" He said, "You post how often?" I said, "Once a day." He said, "I want you to 5x that or 10x it, whatever is feasible." And I said, "Well, it's going to bother people." He said, "I don't care. Listen to me." And I said, "Okay." And I did. And so I'm a big believer in data. So I use a data platform called Shield, which analyzes all of your posts, your audience, everything. I'm not paid for, I should be paid by them, but I'm not. But it's a great tool to use if you want to grow LinkedIn. So the year 2019, he gave me that advice at the end of 2019. It was like November 20th, 2019. I ran my stats for that year. I had 5 million views. I ran my stats at the end of 2020 after I implemented his advice. It's the only difference, 20 million views. So he completely exploded my LinkedIn.
That's amazing. I mean, but you know what? Good for you. You listened to his advice. You didn't just blow it off because he is kind of the king of the social media world.
Well, I'm a big fan of saying don't take direction from someone who hasn't been where you're going. In this instance, he is where I'm going, right? He's ahead of me. So why wouldn't I heed his advice and at least try it and test it? And it worked.
I love that. So I wanted to ask you, you talk about thinking out of the box. And
I
you
do. That doesn't sound like something I'd say.
That's so funny because in your interview you've talked about thinking out of the box because you wanted to have a rap with Jesse Itzer. You went to
Okay.
so
I was hired to speak at an event, and he has a speaker bureau with it under his Vayner umbrella. I'm not on that roster. However, the people, Sarah Blakely and Jesse Itzler, are. And so I had to work with Gary's team a lot during this time because I was the one interviewing them. And I hate basic. Basic is so not interesting. And so I was really pushing the limits with these guys of how we could reimagine it. I wanted Jesse and I rapping on stage at the beginning. I wanted to bring in video of Sarah climbing this balloon, a hot air balloon. We ended up doing that part. We did so many crazy things and we got a great response from it.
So, I mean, that's amazing that you did that. So what's your advice to someone who's thinking about, how do you think out of the box? Like what is that just naturally come to you or do you kind of brainstorm with people? Where do you get your best inspiration from?
I mean, for me, working out is when I am my most creative. So I challenge people, figure out when are you your most creative? Painting, writing, drawing, taking a shower, running, whatever it is, figure that out and then dial it in. Get really intentional. Every day I work out. And when I work out, I say like, here, let's do it. Let's go. Let's come up with solutions. And I just start thinking of ideas. And sometimes I'll see one thing and think, where could that apply in another part of my life? Or where could I add that to? Or, I'm spinning on a rooftop. How else could we do events other than rooftops? What could that look like? Or what events could we do? I start thinking just random ways. And then when I come down to a meeting like this one that I'm describing to you, I start running through my mind of all my ideas and think, okay, here's what basic looks like. That's terrible to me. What can it look like differently? And I just start throwing out ideas. And yeah, a lot of people, they hated the idea of me and Jesse rapping. They thought it was terrible. Okay, I thought it was really cool. All right, so let's go to the next one, right? So I'm not a one and done, like, this is my one idea. We have to do it. I'm like rapid fire. What about this? What about this? Do you like that one? Okay, what about this one? And do you have feedback? Do you have ideas? How can we reimagine? What's worked before? How can we evolve and, come up with an innovative version of that?
Aside It's interesting that you're such an idea person and you obviously are using that tool often. It sounds like you do every day. You're imagining, creating, looking at things, how can you improve them, which is awesome. So do you have other podcasts besides yourself? Do you have other podcasts that you listen to or books that you read that you would recommend for people?
Yeah, right now I just I just had the opportunity to read Believe It by Jamie Kern Lima, which is number one right now on the New York Times bestseller list. Unbelievable. Excellent book for anyone that deals with self-doubt or second guessing themselves. It's amazing. I've read so many books being a podcast host over the last year and a half. It's unbelievable. I love Ryan Serhant's book if you're big into sales. He's got a great book on selling. I love Chris Voss's book on negotiation. I love Alex Carter's book on negotiation. So I've had so many I just got this new book that I'm interviewing Dr. Leaf. It's 5 steps to clean up your mental mess. I just started reading that. That's an amazing book. So there's so many great books out there. And the podcast has really driven me to make sure I read all of them.
Heather, this has been so much fun. I've enjoyed this interview so much, and you have just dropped so many golden nuggets for us. So, as we wrap up, the final question: what if someone wants to get started and reinvent themselves, and you've reinvented yourself several times, but they don't know how to get started, where to get started? What would you suggest to them to do to get started?
Raise your hand and ask for help, right? If people don't know you're struggling, no one's going to come save you. No one's going to help you, right? So the first and best thing you can do is raise your hand, ask for help. And maybe you don't want to do it on social media like I did it, but then reach out to people via email in your life or call them or say, hey, can we meet for a coffee or a virtual coffee or whatever it is? But the more you start letting people know, safe people, not bullies, not jerks, that, hey, I'm in a situation, I need to reinvent myself. I've got this or that going on. Do you have any ideas for me? Hey, you know what? I could connect you to so and so. Or, that happened today. A woman that I had coached during the pandemic sent me a note and she said, my business is unstable. I've got to land a big client. Do you know anyone at Bacardi? I said, I'm sure I do. They're in Miami. Let me go to my LinkedIn. Like, what role are you looking for? Tell me about, how I can help. I made an intro for her. Raise your hand and ask people that are good people for help. Who knows who they might know that can connect you to the next opportunity, job, or pivot for you that you'll be so appreciative for.
Well, thank you, Heather, so much for being on the New Mid. How can people get in contact with you?
I'm at Heather Monahan on all social media. My website is heathermonahan.com. My book is Confidence Creator, and my podcast is Creating Confidence with Heather Monahan.
Awesome. Well, we'll have links to everything. And I so appreciate your time. Enjoy your interview with Jamie. She is incredible. I have to tell you, I saw her speak and I was crying. Her story is so amazing. So I cannot wait for your podcast to come out with her. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.